Imagine this for a second. The ship that brought your latest phone across the ocean ... was built in China. Same goes for your couch, your car, maybe even your kids' toys. In fact, chances are, the very ships that carry the world's goods. Today, most of them were made in Chinese shipyards, so massive, they look like entire cities built out of cranes and steel. 2 decades ago, China wasn't even in the race. Today, it owns it. So, how did this happen? And more importantly, what happened to America? Because this isn't just about who builds more ships. It's about who controls global trade, who writes the rules, and who decides how the world moves. And right now, all signs point east. Look around your home, your phone, your table, maybe even your car. Chances are, they didn't just appear on store shelves. They traveled halfway across the world, packed inside giant ships. But here's the part most people don't know. Those ships themselves, the ones carrying our modern lives, were likely built in China. And not just built, turned out in bulk, in massive shipyards that stretch across entire coastlines. This shift didn't happen overnight. A few decades ago, China wasn't even a major player in this field. Now, it builds more than half of the world's ships and controls nearly all container production. That's not just impressive. It changes everything. Meanwhile, the United States, once the global leader in shipbuilding, barely builds anything today. Less than 0.1%. That's the reality. But this story isn't just about who builds more ships. It's about control over trade, over supply chains, and over the silent machinery that keeps the world running. So, what caused this massive change? How did China pull ahead? And what really happened to America's once great shipyards? To understand all this, we need to trace the steps, from smart planning to deep economic shifts, and uncover how the balance of power moved from west to east. Because this isn't just about steel and engines. It's about who calls the shots when it comes to global trade. 1. China's rise in shipbuilding. Back in 1999, China wasn't known for building ships. At that time, it contributed to less than 5% of the global shipbuilding market. But if we fast forward to 2023, the numbers tell a very different story. Over 50% of the world's ships are now made in China, and more than half of the vessels under construction today are sitting in Chinese shipyards. So, how did this change happen so fast? The answer lies in long-term planning. Around the early 2000s, China's leadership placed shipbuilding at the center of its economic goals. It was clearly outlined in their 10th five-year plan. This wasn't just a policy on paper. They backed it with serious money and manpower. Between 2010 and 2018 alone, the Chinese government poured $132 billion into shipbuilding. And that number doesn't include side deals, like low-interest loans or government-owned banks, stepping in when private investors wouldn't. But money wasn't the only factor. China already had a strong base in heavy industry, steel, aluminum, parts manufacturing, all within its borders. Add to that a large, trained workforce that's relatively affordable, and you get a system where production can happen fast, cheap, and in one place. It's also worth mentioning containers, those metal boxes that hold everything on a cargo ship. 95% of the world's shipping containers are now produced in China. That alone gives them enormous leverage over global supply chains. The result? One shipyard in China now builds more vessels per year than all American shipyards combined. It's not just growth, it's a full takeover. 2. The fall of American shipbuilding. It might sound surprising now, But there was a time when the United States ruled the seas. During World War II, U.S. shipyards were pumping out ships at record speed, especially the Liberty ships that helped win the war. The country had the industrial power, the workforce, and the motivation. America's shipbuilding capacity became a symbol of strength. But once the war ended, priorities started shifting. Manufacturing was no longer the focus. Over time, the U.S. economy began leaning heavily toward services, finance, tech, consulting, and less toward making things by the 1970s. Japan had started leading in shipbuilding. South Korea followed closely in the 1980s. Then came China in the 2000s, after joining the World Trade Organization. And while these countries were investing in infrastructure and scaling up production, the U.S. was moving in the opposite direction, offshoring jobs, closing plants, and letting its shipbuilding muscle weaken. Today, the numbers are hard to ignore. Only 8% of U.S. jobs are in manufacturing. Between 2020 and 2022, China had over 4,000 large ships on order. The U.S., just 12. It's more than just lost market share. It's a strategic weakness. If America can't build its own ships anymore, it becomes dependent. And in today's world, that's a serious risk. 3. Why China builds cheaper and faster building ships is expensive, not just in terms of money, but in time, labor, and infrastructure. China has found a way to manage all three. Let's start with cost. A standard container ship built in China runs around $55 million. The same kind of ship built in the United States, closer to $330 million. That gap doesn't happen by accident. China benefits from government-backed loans with low interest owned, companies that can take on risk without worrying about profits, a system built for mass production. Where scaling up leads to lower costs, it also helps that many of the raw materials and parts are made domestically, which saves both time and shipping fees. In contrast, U.S. shipbuilders face high labor costs, fewer trained workers, and no central support system. There's also very little coordination between industries. Every company is mostly left to figure it out on its own. If the U.S. wanted to catch up, it would have to spend billions, not for profit, but just to keep shipyards running. That's a hard sell to taxpayers and policymakers. So for now, China holds the price advantage. And in global trade, that matters. 4. Trump's plan and the possible blowback during his presidency. Donald Trump put the spotlight back on American manufacturing. Shipbuilding was a big part of that message. To challenge China's hold on the industry, Trump proposed a bold set of measures. High docking fees between $1 million to $3.5 million for Chinese-built ships arriving at U.S. ports. Tariffs on any ship that's Chinese-built, owned, or even operated. Penalties for companies that use Chinese-made ships. Even if just one vessel in their fleet qualifies, the goal was to level the playing field, or at least slow China down. But the ripple effects could be massive. Here's what could happen. Shipping costs would rise quickly. Prices on everyday goods could jump, especially those moved by sea. Inflation might climb. As import costs feed into consumer prices, trade routes could shift. Ships might skip U.S. ports entirely to avoid fees. One analyst called it a potential trade apocalypse, meaning the U.S. could isolate itself. Just when global supply chains are getting more complex. The plan may sound patriotic, but the economic cost could fall heavily on American consumers, businesses, and workers, the very people it's meant to protect. 5. Why this is about more than ships on the surface. This seems like an industry issue. Who makes more ships? Who ships more goods? But if we look closer, it's really about control and influence. In times of peace, having control over shipping means you control global trade. In times of tension, it means you can secure your supply lines or block others from doing so. Right? Now the U.S. depends on ships it didn't build, run by companies it doesn't own, moving through ports it doesn't control. That's a risky setup. China, on the other hand, has expanded its control far beyond its own borders. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, it's invested in ports across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Many of these are now either owned or heavily influenced by Chinese companies. China also owns or funds major shipping lines. It builds the containers. It builds the cranes. And in some cases, it builds the ports themselves. That's why the U.S. is considering a different strategy. Instead of trying to rebuild the entire shipbuilding industry from scratch, it may focus on producing key ship components at home, strengthening ties with South Korea and Japan, who still have strong shipbuilding capacity, encouraging dual-use industries, ones that can serve both commercial and military needs. It's not about matching China ship for ship. It's about being prepared, being less dependent, and making sure the U.S. still has a say in how the world moves. China's rise in shipbuilding didn't happen by chance. It was built step by step, with patience, smart planning, and heavy investment. This was a clear goal, not a side effect. China chose to focus on manufacturing strength, and now it controls the very ships that carry the world's economy. Meanwhile, America's fall wasn't sudden either. It happened over decades, through decisions that favored outsourcing, cut industrial support, and slowly let go of core industries. Now the U.S. finds itself on the sidelines of a race it once led. Can that be reversed? Yes, but not with slogans or quick fixes. It would mean putting real money into key areas, building partnerships with allies like Japan and South Korea, and thinking long-term, even when the short-term cost is high. The question is simple, but serious. Asterisk, asterisk. Is the U.S. ready to spend now to stay independent later, or has China's grip on global shipping quietly become the new normal? Asterisk, asterisk. From the massive shipyards of World War II to today's global trade routes, the ocean has always reflected power. Who moves goods? Who sets the rules? Who stays ahead? Right now, China doesn't need to send warships to control the sea. It just needs to keep building ships. And it's doing that faster, cheaper, and at a scale the world has never seen. For the U.S., catching up won't come easy. It will take more than pressure tactics. It will take real commitment to build, to invest, and to plan for the long run. Because in today's world, cargo ships are more than just transport. They're tools of influence. They decide who connects and who gets left behind. And at this moment, China has the lead.